This is New York's largest Gilded Age mansion, a palace of unimaginable wealth. But behind these gilded walls, a darkness lingered that no visitor ever saw coming. It began in the waning years of the 19th century, a time when ambition roared as loudly as industry, when the skyline of New York shimmered with the promise of endless opportunity, and when men of fortune sought not merely to live, but to leave monuments carved into the very fabric of the city. One such man was a railroad tycoon whose name echoed quietly in the halls of commerce, a figure whose wealth was so immense it seemed almost intangible, measured not in dollars, but in influence, in power, in the invisible gravity he exerted over the lives around him. He was a man obsessed, and in obsession there is always a cost few could see and fewer still would admit. It was in 1892 that he made a choice that would forever tie his name to an architectural spectacle, a palace of ambitions, a home that would become the largest Gilded Age mansion in New York. And yet, behind its grandeur, a house shaped by quiet tensions, human frailty, and the relentless desire to conquer time itself. From the very first day of its conception, the project was more than a house. It was a statement, a declaration that wealth was a language, and he intended to speak it fluently. In every curve of the staircase, in the gleam of imported marble, in ceilings that reached higher than the dreams of ordinary men. He studied European estates in secret, sending emissaries to Venice, to Paris, to London, collecting sketches, materials, and ideas that could be transformed into something uniquely American, yet undeniably decadent. Each decision was deliberate, each choice a negotiation between beauty and utility, between the visible facade of perfection and the hidden demands of an estate so vast that it seemed almost to breathe, almost to live independently of its owners. And yet, beneath the surface of opulence, the human story was already beginning to writhe in shadows, for every gilded hall demanded labor, discipline, and sacrifice that could not be seen from the outside, a quiet price extracted from servants, craftsmen, and even family members who would come to understand, far too late, the weight of living under such ambition. The tycoon's obsession was not born of vanity alone. It was a yearning to be remembered, a need to craft a legacy so visible that time itself would pause to acknowledge it. He walked the site daily, often alone, pacing through the skeletal beginnings of grand staircases, running his hand over freshly cut stone, imagining the echoes of footsteps that would one day traverse corridors he might never fully inhabit. He argued over details with architects and artisans, sometimes for hours, sometimes for days, insisting that a marble vein run a certain way, that a chandelier reflect light at precisely the right angle, that a painting capture not simply beauty, but power, authority, presence. His vision was impossible, the kind that stretches beyond reason, yet he persisted, driven by a compulsion that bordered on mania, a hunger to make imperfection unthinkable within these walls. Every day, the mansion grew not just in size, but in presence, a living testament to the weight of desire and the quiet torment of those who build not for necessity, but for eternity. As construction advanced, whispers began to circulate among the craftsmen and laborers, men and women who understood, with uncanny clarity, the human cost of such an enterprise. Long hours, unyielding schedules, and the demand for precision in every detail left many exhausted, some broken, and yet the tycoon remained a figure apart, his mind occupied with visions the rest could scarcely comprehend. Even his family felt the tension, the way ambition can fracture intimacy, how the pursuit of grandeur can push love and loyalty to the margins. Meals were eaten in silence, conversations were brief, often tinged with the unspoken weight of what this house demanded. Children, servants, spouses, they all moved like shadows across a stage lit entirely by the ambitions of one man, their lives intertwined with a creation whose beauty seemed to demand submission, whose scale rendered ordinary existence almost insignificant. The mansion's design was ambitious in ways that seemed almost unnatural. Plans revealed corridors that stretched endlessly, ceilings that soared beyond any reasonable measure, rooms whose purpose was more poetic than practical, created for entertainments that were themselves exercises in theatricality. But even as the blueprints evolved and the walls began to rise, there was a growing sense among those who observed the project that this house, for all its promise, carried an invisible tension, a sense that no amount of stone or gold could fully contain the human ambitions and anxieties within it. It was a house built not merely for living, but for performing life itself at a scale that demanded sacrifice, silence, and surrender. The tycoon watched over it all with a gaze that never wavered, a man who had already begun to feel the invisible costs of the empire he was erecting, a subtle unease that whispered in the corners, that suggested that wealth alone could never fill the spaces between heartbeats, between expectations, between the quiet, human longing that even the grandest architecture cannot erase. Every detail of the mansion became a reflection of the inner life of its creator. Floors polished to a mirror sheen mirrored not just light, but obsession. Staircases spiraled in a manner that suggested both ascent and entrapment. Gardens were designed to impress, yet their beauty demanded maintenance that consumed lives quietly, invisibly, like the cost of air or water, necessary, inevitable, almost invisible. Those who worked there, those who walked its early halls, spoke later in hushed tones of the sense that the house was alive, that it absorbed ambition and tension alike, that it reflected back the desires of those who dared to shape it. And in the evenings, when the tycoon would wander corridors alone, he would sometimes pause, perhaps aware, perhaps not, that the house was more than a stage for power. It was a mirror, a silent witness to the relentless drive that had brought it into existence, and a reminder that even beauty, when commanded with obsession, carries its own weight of sorrow. By the time the mansion neared completion, it was a palace in every sense, unrivaled in scale, exquisite in detail, yet carrying the invisible traces of the lives it had shaped in its making. Wealth, ambition, desire, all had been invested here, often at the expense of those who could not refuse, of those who had no choice but to participate in its creation. And yet, even in its glory, even in its overwhelming presence, there was a subtle tremor, a whisper of the costs that money cannot erase, of the human hearts and souls that were woven quietly into the fabric of stone, marble, and gold. It was not just a house, it was a monument, but also a question. What does it demand of those who build it? And what does it take from those who live within or near its shadow? And so, as the first lights flickered through the completed windows, casting long, mysterious reflections across the floors, the mansion stood in silence, a testament to the ambition of one man, the quiet suffering of many, and the uneasy tension between beauty and obsession, between wealth and the human soul, a palace whose story had only just begun to unfold, and whose walls would witness triumph, tragedy, and the quiet weight of lives lived in its shadow. Marble, light, shadow. Every inch of the mansion seemed to hum with intention, as if the very walls remembered the hands that shaped them, the hours spent in relentless pursuit of perfection. Ceilings soared far above any ordinary gaze, each frescoed with figures that seemed to move when the candlelight flickered, their eyes following the visitor as if the house itself were alive, aware, even judgmental. Staircases twisted like poetry in stone, their banisters smooth, cold, yet impossibly heavy with the weight of ambition. Each step echoed, not just against the polished floors, but against the silent expectation of those who had built this dream. Every mason, every carpenter, every laborer who had poured sweat, blood, and quiet despair into turning vision into reality. The mansion was magnificent, yes, but magnificence always demands a price, and the echoes whispered of the lives stretched thin beneath its beauty. Rooms appeared endless, opening into one another like a labyrinth of privilege. The walls were paneled in rare woods imported from across the seas, each grain telling stories of distant forests felled to serve a single purpose, to showcase power. Chandeliers dripped with crystal tears, refracting light into patterns that dazzled the eyes yet seemed almost cruel in their precision, a constant reminder of wealth measured in absolute perfection. Carpets were woven with painstaking care, threads so fine that they could be mistaken for air, yet each knot concealed hours of labor, invisible to all but those who bore the weight of creation. Every element, from the door handles carved with the tycoon's insignia to the gilded cornices that seemed to stretch toward infinity, carried the quiet tension of someone who refused compromise, who demanded that beauty and control coexist in a way that few could endure without breaking. Hidden within this splendor were corridors that seemed to bend reality. Secret doors disguised as paneling, rooms concealed behind mirrors, all built for reasons known only to the master of the house. Some said they were for privacy, others for escape, others still for darker purposes, whispers of secrets that the walls themselves could not contain. These passages were narrow, shadowed, and impossible to fully map. They turned the mansion from a mere residence into a maze of obsession. Those who glimpsed them reported a strange sensation, as if the house were testing them, weighing their intentions, demanding that any visitor acknowledge the human cost of such extravagance before stepping further into its realm. Gardens spilled from the mansion like liquid emerald, sculpted into impossible symmetry. Fountains erupted with the roar of wealth, their waters choreographed with clockwork precision, while statues observed in silent judgment. Yet even outside, the human tension persisted. Gardeners laboring in near silence, carrying water, pruning, shaping, living within the shadow of someone else's dream, their sweat nourishing both plants and pride. Every blade of grass, every petal, seemed touched by the invisible hand of obsession that had conceived the house itself. The mansion was not merely a home, it was a performance, a cathedral of control and desire. Every room, every corner, every hidden feature revealed the mind of a man who saw architecture not as shelter, but as a mirror of ambition and a measure of human endurance. To walk these halls was to feel the heartbeat of creation and the tremor of cost, to understand that beauty is never free and that grandeur in its purest form is both irresistible and unforgiving. The mansion was never silent. Even in its earliest days, long before the walls were fully adorned with gold and marble, voices echoed across its halls, voices of ambition, laughter, music, and sometimes fear. The tycoons' balls were legendary, glittering affairs where the elite of New York gathered, gowns brushing the polished floors, men adjusting cufflinks heavy with diamonds, conversations hushed beneath chandeliers that blazed like captured stars. But beneath the opulence, a subtle tension thrummed, a reminder that every smile and toast carried the weight of expectation, and every gesture, every polite conversation was measured against the silent, exacting eyes of the man who had built it all. Guests whispered that the mansion had moods, that it could consume you if you allowed it, and those who stayed too long often left with a sense of unease they could not explain. Among the glitter, tragedy was never far. A daughter, delicate and bright, fell ill during one summer gala, and her absence was felt as a hollow note in the orchestra of celebration. Servants spoke in hushed tones of strange sounds at night, the quiet scraping of furniture moved by unseen hands, doors that closed themselves, and shadows that lingered longer than they should. One heir, a young man restless in the weight of expectation, vanished without a trace during a weekend retreat, leaving only an empty suite and a diary filled with anxious musings that hinted at fear and desperation. The tycoon's obsessions, the relentless pursuit of perfection, had drawn a line between public grandeur and private sorrow, a line that none could cross without sensing the cost. Even ordinary days held a kind of quiet drama. Meetings over design changes became exercises in endurance. Arguments about marble veins or fresco placements lasted hours, leaving artisans and family alike on edge. The house demanded obedience, precision, and vigilance, and those who faltered, whether by error or by fatigue, found themselves quietly reprimanded, their contributions scrutinized with a gaze that never softened. It was a theater in which the walls were both audience and participant, absorbing frustrations and triumphs alike, reflecting the tension of lives bound to the ambition of a single man. Rumors of secret gatherings, small and hidden, added to the mansion's mystique. Late-night discussions in concealed rooms, whispered deals among the elite, and fleeting glances at corridors that no ordinary guest could enter created an undercurrent of mystery. A sense that the house held more than just parties and possessions. It held knowledge, power, and stories meant to be hidden. Even servants, who walked these halls daily, often paused at certain doorways, a shiver passing unnoticed, as if the mansion itself were reminding them of the secrets it protected. And yet, for all the tension, for all the whispers and vanished airs, the mansion remained a place of magnetism, a stage where human desire, ambition, and tragedy intertwined. Every event, every gathering, every silent moment left a trace on the walls, a resonance that outlived the participants. The house recorded not just the laughter of celebrations but the tremors of grief, the silent cries of disappointment, the quiet awe of those who understood finally that beauty and wealth demanded vigilance, sacrifice, and an acceptance of the shadows that always linger just beyond the light. Time, patient and relentless, began to weave its quiet destruction through the mansion. The floors, once polished to a mirror sheen, dulled under the weight of neglect. Marble staircases, once gleaming with ambition, now held faint cracks that whispered of the years and the lives that had passed too quickly beneath them. The gardens, carefully sculpted into perfect symmetry, became overgrown jungles where weeds climbed statues like shadows reaching for forgotten glory. Windows, once sparkling with crystal clarity, were streaked with dust and the memory of countless storms, catching light in ways that revealed the mansion's beauty, yet hinted at the fragility behind its splendor. Inside, silence settled like a thick velvet curtain, and the laughter, music, and hushed whispers of past grandeur seemed to linger only as a memory pressed into the walls, haunting every corridor and hidden alcove. The heirs, scattered and restless, could not maintain the vision their forebear had demanded. Some left, unwilling to carry the weight of expectation. Others stayed, trapped by obligation, by pride, by the invisible chains of legacy. Family quarrels, once concealed behind gilded doors, now surfaced in bitter silence, echoing down halls that had been built for celebration. The mansion, with all its grandeur, became a mirror of human fragility, a reflection of ambition unchecked, of dreams built too high and too heavy, collapsing in subtle, painful ways. Rooms that had hosted glittering balls became chambers of solitude, and halls designed to impress became corridors of memory, where every shadow seemed to carry a warning, every whisper a reminder of what had been lost. Servants who remained long enough to witness the decay spoke of strange occurrences, doors that opened without cause, footsteps in empty rooms, fleeting shadows along corridors that had once been the stage for opulence. Some said the mansion remembered, that it recorded sorrow and loss in ways the eye could not see, that it bore witness to human obsession long after the creators had gone. The deeper into its halls one walked, the more one sensed the weight of invisible burdens, the accumulation of secrets, grief and regrets that had been layered like dust over every surface, every object, every piece of furniture. Even nature seemed to conspire with the mansion's decline. Branches scraped against windows like fingernails. Rain seeped into ceilings with quiet insistence, and vines crept along walls, following invisible lines of symmetry, as if trying to preserve the architectural intent while simultaneously devouring it. There was a strange beauty in this collapse, a haunting poetry in the way decay and grandeur coexisted, a reminder that time spares no one, not wealth, not ambition, not the meticulous hands that once shaped the house with such fervor. Yet within this decline, hints of the past persisted, small, fragile echoes of former glory. A gilded frame holding a faded portrait, a chandelier still reflecting sunlight in fractured prisms, a garden statue standing defiantly among the overgrowth. These remnants were silent storytellers, reminders that behind every ruin there had been human hands, human obsession, human dreams, dreams that had carried both beauty and tragedy in equal measure, and that now waited for those willing to witness the mansion not merely as architecture, but as a repository of history, emotion, and the hidden cost of wealth too vast to contain. Beneath the mansion's glittering surface, behind walls that gleamed with gold and wood, lay corridors few had ever seen, corridors that twisted in silence and waited patiently for discovery. Hidden doors were concealed as panels, mirrors, even bookshelves, so seamlessly integrated that the untrained eye would pass without notice, unaware that a secret lay beyond. Some of these passages were narrow, claustrophobic, forcing those who entered to move slowly, cautiously, as if the house itself demanded obedience. The air within them smelled faintly of cedar, dust, and something older, an intangible presence that seemed to hum with the weight of the countless footsteps that had crossed its floors. Some of them hurried, some of them hesitant, some of them never meant to leave at all. These hidden rooms were not mere curiosities. They were carefully conceived by the tycoon, who seemed to measure not only wealth, but control, power, and the boundaries between public display and private necessity. Some chambers contained treasures too intimate or too scandalous to show. Ledgers of debts and fortunes, personal effects of family members, letters that revealed desires, fears, and transgressions no guest could have imagined. In others, the architecture itself seemed designed to obscure. Angled walls, mirrored ceilings, ceilings so high that light could barely reach the floor, creating pockets of shadow where secrets could linger for decades. The house, magnificent and oppressive in equal measure, held its history as tightly as it held its walls, and those who stepped inside its hidden veins often felt the subtle pressure of expectation pressing down on them, reminding them that every secret had a cost. Servants who knew the mansion intimately spoke of corridors that seemed to move, or perhaps it was only the play of light and shadow that made them appear alive. They whispered of rooms that were locked for generations, keys missing, doors sealed, yet a faint draft suggested air still moved through them, carrying the faintest hint of conversations long ended. Children of the family, even when warned, sometimes found themselves drawn to these spaces, and some returned pale and quiet, as if the walls had whispered to them truths they were not prepared to understand. The mansion became a character itself, an entity aware of its occupants, observant of their fears, and insistent that some knowledge remain hidden even from those who had inherited its wealth. It is said that some of these secret passages were built not for grandeur but for escape, for the concealment of transgression, for the simple act of moving unseen through a house that demanded attention at all times. Guests who stumbled upon them spoke of unease, a prickling sensation that they were intruding into a private world that had never been meant for them, a world shaped by obsession and necessity, where walls contained both beauty and the silent echoes of human frailty. Even today, when dust coats the floors and sunlight filters weakly through tall windows, these passages seem to hum faintly, as if the house remembers every hurried step, every whispered word, every secret that has passed through its veins. And yet, despite their mystery, these hidden spaces invite wonder, a strange allure that pulls one deeper into the mansion's story. Each door, each panel, each secret corridor is a reminder that wealth is not only displayed in marble and gold, but in control, in privacy, in the carefully hidden layers of human ambition and fear. The mansion's secrets are alive, waiting for those who will see beyond the surface, who will feel the weight of ambition, the quiet cost of perfection, and the tension between beauty and what it conceals, as though the house itself is both storyteller and sentinel, guarding its truths in silence. The mansion stands today like a memory of all who enter, its walls weathered yet resolute, a testament to ambition, obsession, and the quiet tragedies that unfolded within. Sunlight falls unevenly across the cracked marble floors, catching on the edges of gilded cornices, highlighting the contrast between enduring beauty and the relentless passage of time. The gardens, though tamed by careful hands, still bear the wild traces of decades gone by, overgrown hedges brushing statues with delicate insistence, reminding visitors that nature has its own way of reclaiming what was once meticulously controlled. Every room, every corridor, every hidden corner carries the resonance of human lives pressed into its structure, a subtle weight that no restoration can erase, a whisper of labor, desire, and the cost of perfection. Preservation efforts have been painstaking, deliberate, and yet they are not merely acts of repair. Each stroke of paint, each polished surface, each carefully reconstructed feature is a negotiation with history, a dialogue with ambition and obsession. Architects and historians move quietly through halls that once rang with music and laughter, tracing patterns, recording textures, speaking in hushed tones about the lives that shaped every brick, every panel, every vaulted ceiling. The mansion is treated as both artifact and witness, an object of admiration and reverence, a fragile bridge between the grandeur of the past and the curiosity of the present. Visitors, scholars, and caretakers alike sense that while wealth and beauty endure, so too does the tension, the cost, the subtle unease that accompanied its creation, and the secrets it has held for more than a century. Even today, the mansion exerts a kind of gravity. Its presence demands attention, curiosity, reflection. Footsteps echo differently in restored rooms, carrying the weight of history into the present, and corridors long sealed now whisper faintly of forgotten passages and hidden chambers. Each door that opens, each panel that slides back, is an invitation to peer into lives once lived at a scale few could imagine, to consider the human toll behind opulence, to feel the tension between admiration and unease. Those who spend time here begin to sense that preservation is more than maintenance. It is a moral and emotional engagement, a negotiation with the lives, hopes, and fears of the people who built and inhabited this house. The mansion today is a mirror, reflecting not just gilded ceilings and marble floors, but the enduring human fascination with grandeur, ambition, and the shadows that follow wealth. It reminds us that beauty is fragile, and that even in restoration there is an acknowledgement of loss, of vanished heirs, of hidden tragedies, of ambitions that stretch too far, of secrets that linger in corners the eye cannot reach. Preservation becomes an act of storytelling, a way of holding memory alive, of giving voice to those who shaped the house yet could never fully inhabit its promise. And so the mansion remains, a monument and a mystery, a site where the past converses quietly with the present, where light and shadow play across surfaces worn and renewed, where visitors can feel both awe and unease, wonder and sorrow, a place where history is palpable, ambition is visible, and the quiet human cost of beauty and wealth resonates still, waiting for those who will listen closely enough to hear its stories, to feel the weight of its corridors, and to understand that preservation is not just a task, but a negotiation with time, memory, and the enduring tension between desire and consequence. Even as the mansion gleamed with wealth, shadows gathered in quiet corners, invisible yet insistent, shaping the lives of those who dwelled within. Families moved like actors on a stage too vast for intimacy, their laughter carefully measured, their sorrow carefully hidden, each step through marble halls weighed by expectation. Tragedy was never announced with fanfare. It crept silently, a subtle tremor behind gilded doors. Children fell ill in sunlit rooms while portraits of ancestors observed silently from walls, and servants whispered of moments when grief seemed to hang in the air like an unshakable perfume, invisible yet suffocating. No announcement could capture the intensity of loss here. It was a quiet, lingering presence that seeped into the floors, the ceilings, the spaces designed to hold perfection but incapable of containing human frailty. Rumors spread quickly, though quietly, among the staff and neighbors alike. One heir, restless and haunted by the weight of legacy, disappeared during a summer gathering, leaving only a diary filled with anxiety and cryptic observations. Guests recalled fleeting glimpses of figures in corridors late at night, figures that seemed almost spectral, moving with purpose yet impossible to track. Others spoke of whispered arguments behind locked doors, of tears shed in stairwells too grand to be private, of silences that roared louder than any voice. The mansion had become a stage for human desperation, a place where wealth amplified vulnerability and the pursuit of perfection magnified tragedy. Scandals, carefully concealed from the public eye, played out behind mirrors and tapestries. Letters discovered decades later hinted at secret liaisons, rivalries, and betrayals, all woven into the daily rhythms of a household obsessed with appearances. Even the smallest misstep could reverberate through the corridors, turning a private disagreement into a prolonged period of tension, leaving emotional scars etched invisibly into the walls. The mansion's architecture itself seemed to amplify this strain. High ceilings allowed echoes to linger, long corridors magnified footsteps, and hidden chambers offered both refuge and temptation, giving shelter to confessions that could never be spoken openly. Death, too, found its place within these walls, sometimes sudden, sometimes slow and relentless. Illnesses that today might be treatable claimed lives quietly in opulent bedrooms. In other cases, accidents, falls on polished floors, collapses on winding staircases, carried a cruel inevitability. Each loss added layers of weight to the already heavy air, and though the household continued its routines, the tension never truly lifted. Guests at evening gatherings might toast in crystal glasses, unaware of the unseen grief that had passed through the same halls only hours before. The mansion absorbed it all, storing sorrow in corners, in shadows, in the silent echoes of footsteps no longer heard. And yet, for all the heartbreak and whispers of scandal, life persisted. Families adapted, servants endured, and the mansion remained a vessel of both aspiration and despair. Each tragedy, each secret, each unexplained death became part of its story, woven invisibly into the architecture, shaping the rhythm of its halls and the expectations of those who walked them. The mansion was beautiful, undeniably, but its beauty was inseparable from its tension, its wealth inseparable from its cost, and its grandeur inseparable from the fragile, haunted lives that had been pressed into every stone, every panel, every gilded corner, leaving behind a legacy that was as brilliant as it was quietly tragic. The mansion had a way of swallowing those who lived within its walls, not physically, but quietly, invisibly, until their presence seemed almost spectral. Heirs, burdened with both inheritance and expectation, moved through corridors lined with portraits of forebears who watched with silent, unyielding eyes. Some arrived brimming with confidence, convinced they could command the house as their ancestor had, but the weight of legacy proved heavier than marble and gold, pressing down invisibly, shaping thought and desire in ways no one could measure. Over time, the strain showed. Small changes at first, a glance too long at a mirror, a hand trembling over a ledger, sleepless nights spent pacing through halls that seemed to stretch endlessly. Then, some simply disappeared. One young heir vanished in the late summer, leaving behind only a faintly folded note and an open window, as if the mansion itself had suggested a way to leave but never revealed how. Staff whispered that the corridors had watched, that rooms themselves had guided the steps, offering routes only the desperate could see. Guests arrived at dinner to find a chair empty, a place setting untouched, and the story was always met with hushed murmurs, polite speculation, and the uneasy sense that the house was not merely a backdrop, but a participant in the disappearance. The mansion's labyrinthine design, its secret passages and hidden stairways, seemed almost complicit, a stage for absence and the quiet erosion of identity, where the line between voluntary retreat and compelled flight was never entirely clear. Madness, too, was rumored, a shadow that crept along the edges of opulence. Heirs who once dazzled with charm and intelligence became withdrawn, speaking to shadows in rooms no one else entered, scribbling endlessly in journals with pages filled by repetition and obsession. Some were said to converse with portraits of ancestors, seeking counsel or absolution, and in the hushed darkness their voices echoed like whispers of the past, blending with the creak of floorboards and the sigh of heavy drapery. Guests and staff alike sensed it. The house, for all its beauty, demanded a psychological toll, a negotiation of sanity against the relentless pull of expectation, wealth, and the unreachable standards set by generations before. The mansion itself seemed to bear witness, corridors twisting to amplify sound, staircases designed to make even small missteps feel monumental, rooms that reflected both light and shadow with uncanny clarity. Those who wandered its halls late at night sometimes glimpsed figures at the edges of perception, fleeting silhouettes that vanished when approached. Some believed these were echoes, residual energy of those lost, lingering in the spaces they once occupied. Others whispered that the house amplified pre-existing frailties, that the very architecture encouraged obsession, doubt, and despair, shaping minds in ways no therapist or relative could hope to repair. Despite the disappearances and the whispers of madness, life continued, though never untouched by memory. The mansion remained a vessel of expectation, of pressure and promise, a place where brilliance and fragility coexisted, and where the cost of inheritance was measured not in gold or property, but in the subtle erosion of certainty, the quiet collapse of composure, and the invisible tension that haunted every step through halls built for greatness, yet steeped in shadow, leaving all who entered to wonder how much of legacy was a gift, and how much was a trap carefully concealed beneath marble and light. Time, relentless and unyielding, began to stretch the mansion beyond the bounds of human endurance. Once pristine marble floors dulled to a muted gray, reflecting only fragments of what had been. Crystal chandeliers hung heavy with dust, their prisms scattering sunlight into fractured rainbows that hinted at former brilliance while emphasizing absence. The gardens, once meticulously sculpted, had become wild, each vine and shrub reclaiming space, creeping over fountains, wrapping statues as if the earth itself sought to erase the hubris of human ambition. Windows, streaked with age and rain, caught glimpses of what was left behind, offering views of opulence now tinged with decay, a palace slowly surrendering to silence. The heirs, fractured by scandal, grief, and madness, drifted from the estate, some fleeing entirely, others settling into distant lives where their lineage carried weight but not presence. Staff who had once maintained perfection departed quietly, unable to endure the oppressive emptiness of halls designed for constant activity and scrutiny. The house became a monument to absence, echoing with ghosts of conversation, laughter, and sorrow, every footstep across its empty floors amplifying the silence. The mansion was still magnificent, and yet its grandeur had become a trap, a reminder of what remained when human care and attention were withdrawn, a visual elegy to ambition and obsession alike. Rooms that had hosted glittering balls were now cold and cavernous, mirrors reflecting peeling wallpaper and the muted light of distant street lamps. Hidden corridors, once secretive and alive with whispers, became silent labyrinths where dust settled thick and undisturbed, yet they retained the faint memory of footsteps and hushed conversations, as if the house itself were remembering the lives it had sheltered and scrutinized. Letters, journals, and objects left behind hinted at vanished lives, at stories never fully told, fragments of human desire and despair pressed into the very fabric of the estate. Each element of the mansion seemed to hum with the tension of its past, an architecture of obsession preserved not in maintenance but in memory. Even nature seemed complicit in the mansion's slow surrender. Rainwater seeped into ceilings, pooling silently where once chandeliers had caught and amplified light. Leaves and debris drifted through cracked windows, carried on gusts that whispered through empty corridors. Statues, moss-covered and tilted, surveyed overgrown lawns with a quiet dignity, as if judging both the builders and the inheritors who had failed to sustain their vision. The mansion had become a stage where human ambition and natural reclamation intersected, where beauty persisted only in contrast to decay, where every shadow was a reminder of time's unyielding authority. Yet within this abandonment lay a strange, melancholic poetry. The mansion remained magnificent, a relic of ambition, a vessel of memory, a testament to both human aspiration and limitation. Its silence was not emptiness, but resonance, carrying traces of lives, of obsessions, of loss, of brilliance that had burned too brightly to endure. The house awaited rediscovery, a patient sentinel standing at the intersection of wealth, history, and human fragility, a place where every wall, every corridor, every echo reminds us that beauty, obsession, and decay are inseparable companions, entwined in a narrative that continues even when the living have long departed. Years after the mansion fell into silence, explorers and historians began to uncover traces of its hidden past, objects that had been carefully concealed, as if waiting patiently for someone to listen. In dusty attics, behind false panels, and beneath loose floorboards, journals surfaced, fragile with age, their pages yellowed and brittle. Each entry revealed thoughts, fears, and obsessions that had never been spoken aloud, words that trembled with the pressure of expectation and the weight of inheritance. The handwriting varied, sometimes hurried and frantic, sometimes careful and deliberate, but always intimate, a whisper of human vulnerability pressed into the margins of a life measured against perfection. Ledgers were discovered alongside these journals, volumes heavy with arithmetic and obsession, numbers meticulously recorded, tracking not only wealth and expenditure, but the minutiae of daily life. The cost of marble imported from distant quarries, the wages of servants, the prices paid to artists and craftsmen who bent reality to the tycoon's vision. Yet between the lines of commerce were hints of human tension, disputes over payment, grievances of exhaustion, small rebellions of those who labored beneath the weight of expectation. Even in ink, the mansion's hidden costs became tangible, a ledger of human endurance alongside the accumulation of material splendor. Artifacts, too, surfaced. Ornate letters sealed with wax, delicate jewelry left in drawers long forgotten, fragments of personal effects that seemed to cry out for recognition. A locket with a faded photograph, a cracked porcelain teacup, a handkerchief with embroidered initials, all spoke to moments of intimacy, of love, of quiet grief that had unfolded behind the mansion's grandeur. These objects, small and fragile, became portals into the lives of those who had walked the halls before, revealing a layer of humanity invisible to those who had only seen the mansion from its exterior, the outside polished and untouchable, the interior a repository of subtle, lingering emotion. Some journals hinted at darker secrets, corridors and rooms that no visitor had seen, passages where whispers of scandal, fear, and despair had lingered. Marginal notes suggested conversations never recorded elsewhere, confessions written in solitude, maps of the house that included hidden chambers and private sanctuaries. The mansion, it seemed, had been more than a home. It had been a vault for human experience, a place where ambition, obsession, sorrow, and secrecy intertwined, leaving traces that only decades later would be uncovered. Those who examined these artifacts spoke of a profound unease, a sense that the house itself was speaking through them, revealing not just the grandeur it had contained, but the quiet, often painful, lives that had been pressed into its walls. In discovering these remnants, historians and visitors alike felt a strange intimacy with the past. The journals, ledgers, and artifacts were not simply evidence, they were voices, echoes of lives shaped by wealth, obsession, and hidden cost. They reminded those who encountered them that the mansion had never been merely a house, that every corridor, every gilded surface, every shadowed room had been a witness to human ambition and fragility alike. And even as these objects were cataloged, preserved, and displayed, the mansion retained its aura of mystery, hinting always at secrets still concealed, stories still waiting to be told, and the enduring weight of lives lived, hidden, and remembered within its walls. Today, the mansion breathes again, though cautiously, under the careful hands of preservationists who treat every surface as both artifact and witness. Scaffolding rises like skeletal guardians, casting angular shadows across ceilings that once gleamed with gold. Craftsmen move deliberately through the halls, polishing, repairing, reconstructing, yet aware that each action is a negotiation with the past. Marble floors are scrubbed and sealed, yet faint cracks remain, reminders of decades of neglect, and every restored gilded cornice carries the invisible weight of human obsession that first conceived it. Light filters through windows long streaked with dust, illuminating dust motes that float like tiny specters, reminding visitors that the house remembers, that restoration is not simply repair, but a dialogue with ambition, memory, and time itself. The gardens, once wild and unrestrained, are now pruned and measured again, though the earth insists on a quiet rebellion. Vines creep over wrought iron gates, leaves press against statues, and fountains are coaxed back to life, spilling water in careful arcs. Those who work here speak in whispers of the mansion's personality, noting how corridors seem to change depending on the light, how rooms respond to footsteps as though the walls themselves hold the memory of their original creators. Each repair is an act of reverence, a recognition that this house is both living history and fragile entity, requiring patience, insight, and a respect for the subtle human tensions embedded in its structure. Inside, restoration teams handle every object with meticulous care. Chandeliers dismantled, cleaned, and reassembled. Murals touched with precision that honors the artist's hand while stabilizing fading pigments. Woodwork polished and repaired, yet left with the patina of age, preserving the quiet trace of countless lives who had touched it before. Each act feels like a negotiation between beauty and imperfection, between human desire for control and the inevitability of time. Even as the mansion regains splendor, its corridors continue to hum with the echoes of past ambition, of decisions made in obsession, of secrets pressed into walls, reminding all who enter that restoration can reveal but cannot erase the human cost of grandeur. Visitors, historians, and curious onlookers now traverse these halls with the careful awe of those entering a sacred space. Footsteps echo differently here, carrying a weight both literal and invisible. Each repaired window, each polished floor, each revitalized room invites reflection on the lives that built this mansion, the ambitions that demanded perfection, and the sacrifices hidden beneath layers of gold and marble. Restoration does not soften the mansion's presence. It amplifies it, offering a dialogue across generations between ambition and consequence, beauty and fragility, power and memory. And so the mansion stands again, partially restored, fully alive, a canvas where human hands and human intent converge, where light and shadow play across surfaces renewed yet still haunted, and where every corner, every corridor, every whispered echo invites both admiration and contemplation. Preservation is no mere act of repair, it is an act of listening, of honoring the tension, obsession, and quiet cost that have always been entwined with this house, a delicate balance between past and present, grandeur and fragility, waiting for those patient enough to witness it fully. This is not just a house, it's a mirror, reflecting the beauty, the ambition, and the darkness of the Gilded Age.